All right, pretty simple. You know, just conversational. But tell us your name and tell us a little bit about how you got started in the film industry. You growing up, if that was something that you pursued, or is it now?
My name is Georg Joutras. How I got started in the film industry. Well, I mean, I when I was in college, I took filmmaking here at the University of Nebraska. That was one of my classes I took, and I really enjoyed it. And that was a number of years ago, and really didn't do anything with it after that for 20 or 30 years. I got into it by knowing the McGinn Ranch, and I had done a book on the ranch back in 07, 08, and then I got given a camera for I think it was my birthday one year, maybe it was Christmas, and I thought, well, I guess I've got to do something with it. My family gave it to me. It was actually for Christmas, and I thought, well, maybe I'll go out to the ranch and shoot a little bit of film, a little bit of video. And I went out there and started filming, and one thing kind of led to another, and I kept getting more and more into it, and my training back from college kind of kicked back in, and kind of had the story I want to tell, and one thing led to another, and I started to accumulate more gear, more expensive gear, better quality gear, professional, and just kind of got into this film project over the course of a couple of years.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about the relationship and how that started with the McGinn Ranch and Laren specifically.
Right.
Tell us about that relationship.
Yeah, I met Laren McGinn back in 03. Here in Lincoln, there's the Burkholder building, which is an art gallery. And he was an artist who would show there occasionally, and I had a space down there as well. And everyone kept saying, you got to meet Laren. He's an interesting guy, you'll like him, so forth. And one day the stars aligned and he showed up in town, and we went out to lunch with some other folks and found out we really did kind of get along. And he's a very interesting guy. He's a rancher. He's used to work in the film industry, used to do some acting, used to do some drawing, painting. He's done a lot of different things. And he invited me out to the ranch if I was ever out in that area. And typically, when people invite you to stop in at their house or whatever, I'm probably like most people. I don't, well, thanks, but I'm probably never going to do it. Well, I was out there about a week or so later working on a book project on the Sandhills, and I needed a place to stay. And I was literally 10 miles from the ranch. And I thought, oh, what the heck? So I called him up, and he said, come on over. And I was going to stay one night, and I ended up staying a week. When I showed up, they had a program with Yale University where they would send Yale Fellows, or what they were called. These are movers and shakers in the world, politicians, business people. And they show up at Yale for a year and go through an intensive training course. And anyway, part of their program was to send people out into the U.S. wherever they wanted to go, kind of to a ranch or to a farm or to a business, and give them a feel for what it was like. Well, the week I showed up at Laren's was the week the Yale Fellows were there. So I'm meeting people from China, Russia, Yugoslavia, Costa Rica, all over, Brazil, and so it was pretty impressive.
Yes.
So that's kind of my first exposure to the McGinn Ranch. And, so I met Mike McGinn, who's Laren's dad. I met Karen, who's his sister. I met Matt McGinn and Butch McGinn, who are on the other half of the ranch. And just found out I really enjoyed these people. I love the environment. It was a very quiet, I think, is kind of the feel I get. You're out there, you don't hear cars going by, you don't hear planes going overhead. You hear cows and wind and nature. Right. And that really spoke to me.
That's awesome. And talking about being the sole producer and the sole thinker behind this, tell us how the process of it. It took you several years, you just said.
Right, yeah. I started in 2014, and I filmed for 2 years. I actually filmed for 1 year and kept upgrading my camera equipment. And I got to the point where I got a real high quality professional camera after 1 year. And I thought, well, now I've got to reshoot everything. I mean, I've got to do it as best I can do it. So I spent another year kind of reshooting the whole year in the life of the ranch. So I put 2 years into filming, probably 100 to 120 days over that period at the ranch. And then after that was the post-production, which I had never really done before, but I'm always one who will dive in and kind of learn what needs to be done. So, I had to learn about sound engineering, getting the sound quality where it needed to be. Had to learn about editing, which I knew a little bit about that. I had done some video work prior to this, so I was familiar with the editing. Had to do color grading, which is a whole nother process that I never had to worry about. What else? Titling, closed captioning, all the aspects. The only thing I didn't do on the film is write the music. Tom Larson, who's done a lot of work for PBS over the years and NET TV, he's written a lot of music for documentaries. He's very well known in that field. And I had called him up one day kind of out of the blue and said, Tom, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing, are you interested? Thinking he would say no. Well, he said, yeah, that sounds great. So we got together and we talked it over, and he came on board to write the score for the film. So other than his input, that's really the only part I didn't do. Yeah.
Tell us a little, Tom, he's a professor, correct?
Right.
At the University of Lincoln?
Correct.
And you've shot this, specifically in my position, I'm all about Nebraska. I kind of bleed red, but tell us what it's like to work with, a composer right here in Nebraska, filming here in Nebraska, and what that roots really bring to the film, I guess. Yeah,
this film is a 100% Nebraska production. Everything about it is all Nebraska, and when Tom came on board, it's just fascinating to watch someone at the top of their game who knows what they're really doing and are just incredible at it. They make it look so easy. But yeah, we'd go in there and he'd send me a bunch of songs that he kind of put together for sections of the film, and I'd listen to them and we'd kind of talk back and forth a little bit. But for the most part, he kind of nailed it. He did a great job. He captured the spirit of what I was trying to project with the film. And we'd get together occasionally and talk over things. And Tom's just a great guy to begin with. Very easy to talk with, very easy to work with, and to work with someone that good was a real honor on my part, especially someone who really didn't have much experience in the filmmaking world. I didn't have a name that I could say, hey, here's who I am. You want to work with me? Now this was, here's who I am. I hope you'll work with me. Right. And he did say yes, and it was a great experience.
That's awesome. When you talking a little about the film and being a rancher and deeply revolving around agriculture, had you had experience previously in agriculture to know some of what to expect, or did you experience a lot you never thought you would?
Well, when I started going out to the ranch in 2003, I knew virtually nothing about it as far as the details of how cows get raised and brought to market and what has to happen at a ranch. You think you kind of know. Okay, you raise cows and you sell them. It's not that difficult. Well, there's so much more to it than that. It's how you take care of the land. It's how you take care of the cattle. It's how you take care of everything that goes along on a ranch. When the cattle get sick, you got to deal with it. When the weather comes in, you got to deal with it. Really the life of a rancher is, how do you deal with it? That's what you do. Mm-hmm. And, these people know, they're professionals in their field. They know all the details, how you pull a calf when you need to, how you take care of cows that are sick, how you rotate cows among the pastures to keep the land viable and keep the grass growing so you can raise cattle. Dealing with the water issues, dealing with the government regulations. There's a lot that goes into it. Right. And yeah, I knew virtually nothing at the detail level. And as part of when I was working on the film, I was actually out working with the guys. I'd go out in the pickups and on the four-wheelers, and they were kind enough to let me do a few things that I probably couldn't mess up too bad. And I'd been out there for a number of years, so I kind of got a feel for what's really involved, even though I didn't have to be there every day doing it.
That's awesome. And tell us a little bit about, you know, taking this film to a lot of, because the first viewing is in Kansas,
Right.
and there's going to be a lot of non-agriculture, well, rancher people possibly, you know, filming. What's it going to be like to, you know, your experience and their probably sit in the same shoes as them to expose this film of rancher? What kind of expression do you think that they'll have as an insight, hopefully a positive insight that they get from, you know, a rancher's perspective?
I think what they're gonna see when they watch this film, it's kind of a quiet film. It's a very subtle story, which is kind of the story of the Nebraska Sandhills. You go out to the Sandhills, you know, they don't kind of hit you in the face when you're out there the first time. You're kind of like, oh, okay, hills, nothing here, but it grows on you. You get the feel for the land, the people, the communities. So that was a big aspect of what I wanted to show. You know, small communities are still viable. Well, they're still around. I'm not sure how viable they really are in today's world, but you know, they're important. And the way people work out there is totally different than the way people work in a city. It just is. There's a lot more respect for people out there, a lot more of live and let live. I mean, you can do what you do, I'll do what I do. We may not totally agree, but we respect what each other does. So that was important to show. The other thing I wanted to show was how well these cattle are actually treated. I mean, you know, it's an industry, it's a business, but you know, how you deal with the animals that are in your care is really important. And I was lucky enough to be around ranchers who really take great care of the cattle. It's their livelihood. And whether you agree with cattle ranching or you don't agree, or you agree with, you know, eating meat or not, it's really not anything I was too concerned about. You know, you make your own decisions there. But what I wanted to show is how well these cattle are treated, and they're treated very well. You see a lot of happy cows out on these ranches. You can tell. I mean, so when people go and watch the film, which it's premiering at the Kansas City Film Festival here in April, I think they're going to be surprised by the tone of it. You know, like I said, it's a very quiet film. The story kind of grows as you go through the film, and by the end of it, I think you kind of have a pretty good idea of what ranching is about, at least in, you know, this particular ranch anyway, what the people are like, and how they, you know, what they're trying to do out there. So I think people will come away from it feeling pretty good.
I do too, and I think you did I think it was great because as a farmer and rancher, and we're always put into the public eye a little bit differently than a lot of other industries, and I think that the film was a very, very positive lookout of our industry, and we kind of, being in the Western sports industry specifically, we have to really watch what we say, how we say it, or what we show, and I think you did a very positive thing, and so I just wanted to say that.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think it is important to try and, you know, there's enough negativity in the world. Right. Every day it gets worse and worse. You know, I don't want to put any of that out there. And honestly, at this ranch, the McGinn Ranch, there really isn't any. I mean, people say, oh, you cut out the bad things that happened, or, you know, the tension that was going on. There's not a lot of that. You know, they worked together as a team, and that was important to me. That's why I kept going out there. It's a pleasure to go out there. You know, you drive from the city, you get to Grand Island, you turn north along the highway up there, and you know, I can just feel the stress kind of falling off myself. And by the time you get to the ranch, you're ready to, you know, kind of be in that environment, which is a totally different environment than in the city.
In the film, they expressed, you know, the parallels between the ocean floor and the Sandhills, and I thought that was a great parallelism. As the producer, tell us a little bit about that parallelism, and did you feel that same thing when you were shooting, editing, and all that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time trying to come up with a name for the film. Mm-hmm. We went through, you know, 50 or 100 different names, and nothing quite seemed to capture what it is encompassing everything out there. And one day I was doing an interview, and one of the guys said, you know, it's kind of like it's an ocean of grass. You know, back in the old days when it was an inland ocean, you know, you had the waves crashing on the shore. And I'm paraphrasing, but when you look at the grass now, it is kind of like waves crashing, you know, on the prairie. So that's where the name came from. And I think it captures it perfectly, really.
Right. Let's see here. I think as far as editing, from my perspective, question for me. As far as editing, did you use like the Final Cut, or like what do you use for a big film like that?
Right. I use Adobe Premiere. I'm kind of an Adobe guy. I used to be in the Apple world. I've got Apple computers, but the Final Cut, from a technical standpoint, they kind of weren't keeping it up.
Right.
So I got into Adobe Premiere Pro, and that's what I use. And I have Adobe. Actually, I'm going to draw a blank now.
You're fine.
I use After Effects and for the graphics,
part of it, yeah.
Right, and Audition is for the sound, and I use a bunch of different plugins to help get the better sound, because when I did this film, I had one on-camera microphone, shotgun microphone on the camera, and that's where all the sound came from, and it was incredibly effective, actually.
Right.
But with that, you got wind noise and environmental sounds you got to kind of deal with. Yeah. So
that's amazing, because I'm an Apple person. I use Final Cut for a lot of stuff, and I'm just starting to get into the motion of using motion and After Effects and stuff. But it's a different animal.
Yeah.
It's an animal in itself, to be honest. And I don't have any formal training with any film, editing video.
Right.
It's something that I enjoyed, and my boyfriend, who's a pro rodeo announcer and a rancher, he's sponsored by a boot company. Anyways, he wanted to portray the life of being a rancher and being on the road as a pro rodeo announcer, and how basically durable and life lasting those jobs and those things mean to him, same as the boot company. So I was like writing out this script.
Right.
I'm a music person, so like trying to find the right music for that, but obviously didn't do any of the composure of it or anything like that, but trying to figure all that in, and again, not having pro technology or professional technology, cameras and stuff like that, just trying to figure out how to do all that, and then going back and then chopping it up and figuring it out. I mean, it was fine for my first time.
Yeah.
First time, but you gotta jump in. Or else.
It's like anything else, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And, with today's technology and tools, I mean, when I first started doing editing when I was in college, it was the 8mm, cutting it with a razor blade, taping it together. Right. You really only had one chance to get the edit right. Because back then we weren't making duplicate copies to make your edit copy and all that. We didn't have that money to spend on it. But today, it's just so easy, and it's really more, technically you got to kind of understand what makes a good edit and what makes a good scene. Mm-hmm. But, you don't want to just copy what everyone else is doing too. You want to be original, and that's kind of what I was searching for, with the film, was how do I get my perspective out there.
Right.
But yeah.
So do you do film stuff full time then now, or?
No, I do a bunch of different things. I'm working on 2 documentaries now that I'm not, that aren't mine. I'm kind of a hired cinematographer, so that's kind of nice. I just show up, I shoot, which I really enjoy, capturing the visual story, and then I'm kind of done with it. So I do that. I've got some other businesses I kind of dabble in.
Yeah.
Enough to keep me busy. Yeah.
And then tell us a little bit, and you don't have to, if nothing's secure yet, but tell too much, but it is showing in Kansas City for
right.
it. Any Nebraska on the horizon?
We're going to be showing it in Broken Bow, which is, the closest major town to the ranch, about 40 miles away. And I believe that's going to happen in June, the first week of June maybe. We're kind of talking through that, but it'll be available there. Obviously the film festival in Kansas City. And, I've had discussions with a few other theaters in Nebraska, but I really haven't pursued it yet, because I kind of wanted to get through the film festival world, and kind of see how that all worked. Because, it's like everything else, it's a learning curve to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and so forth. We'll have it up on like Amazon. If you have like an Amazon Prime, at some point you'll be able to download it and watch it that way. So it'll be kind of in the on-demand world, I think, more than rolling out to a lot of theaters.
That's awesome. What was your biggest eye-opening experience, or your most memorable experience through the entire process?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Biggest eye-opening. Boy. Probably this probably isn't a real specific example, but the eye-opening is how hard these people work. Mm-hmm. I've helped with haying. I drove a tractor around for a summer, and I've done a little bit of that. I've helped with the fencing, which is an ongoing job. If you're really a good neighbor, you keep your fences in great condition. I mean, fencing alone will just beat the heck out of you. It's a tough thing to do when you're doing it manually with a post hole digger and stretching wire. I'm not sure there was one thing that they did that was just totally eye-opening that blew my mind, that I never would have thought of. Pulling a calf is an interesting experience. First time you do that, it's kind of a wow.
Yeah.
But no, the eye-opening is just how comfortable people are, which, in a city, people are always, for the most part, putting on a little bit of a presentation, trying to present themselves in the best possible light. Out there, you are who you are. Mm-hmm. And, here I am. If you don't like me, well, okay. That's just kind of the way it is, more or less, so there's not a lot of posturing.
Right. So did you follow them? Who was it? Is it Matt? No. It might have been Kevin Anderson? No. Who's the mayor?
Kevin Anderson.
Okay, so is he the mayor and the football coach? Or
no, Matt is the football coach. Yeah, Matt is the football coach.
So what is it like to go from the ranch one day to the afternoon and then leaving and then going to the football game and coming back and experiencing that full life in their shoes? They got so much stuff going on.
Yeah, well, everyone does a lot of things out there. Matt coaches football, really good at it. Kevin has been the mayor of Dunning. Everyone's on the fire department out there. So if something starts burning, they all go. They have to deal with it. It's all volunteer. There are people on the ambulance runs. There's people who help in all the schools. I mean, everyone's involved because it's such a small community. You have to be. You can't just push it off on other people. So, going from the ranch to a football game to going to Broken Bow and going back, it's just part of the deal there. You drive a lot. Everywhere you go, you know people. But, there's a certain feeling of commitment to the area out there. People live out there. They're not planning on moving away. They're trying to figure out a way to stay out there. So you get a different viewpoint on life, I think.
Yeah. And I think the most interesting part is when you see agriculture today, if you go to an elementary classroom or even a high school classroom and say, how many of your grandparents or your parents still live on a farm?
Right.
And a lot of times you see that we're 2 to 3 generations removed from agriculture. And to see something that's 130 years, who's been in a family for 130 years, mm-hmm. who've been there, that's astonishing in itself, just because of the way agriculture has progressed throughout the years.
Right.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Well, how many other family industries have been around for 130 years?
Right.
I mean, it really is the fact they kept it going and growing throughout, from the 1880s on to, 2018. It really is stunning achievement. Mm-hmm. And, and the fact that it stayed mostly in the families, is another great achievement. You just don't see that anymore. Right. So, yeah, like I say, it's longevity. People take the long view in dealing with the land. They're not going to pile a bunch of cows on it if it's going to hurt their land. They're taking a longer view. What's going to happen 10, 20, 30, 100 years down the road? So that plays into the whole thing.
And I think, who is it, Mike or Butch, who just said it's, you sit here, you can sit here for your whole life, and then in what, 10 minutes, you see your whole life just run up the chute.
Right.
And that was, I mean, you know, I didn't ever take it into that point of consideration, I guess, or never even think of it that way. But that's really what it is. Every time we load up cows, it's exactly what it is there goes everything that we did, and hopefully it does well.
Right. Well, and that particular quote in the film was because it was one of the drought periods, you know, which come around every so often. And people had to start culling the herd a little bit. The land couldn't support that many cows, so they had to get rid of a lot of cows one year. They just couldn't get enough feed to deal with them. You know, so here you've got generations of cows you've raised basically to get to this point, and now we got to get rid of a large chunk of them because right now we can't support them. You know, that's a tough pill to swallow, and then you got to start over and build back up again. You know, it's no different than when a storm comes through and you lose 20 or 50 calves, that freeze to death. And the worst part is you have to go out there and typically put them out of their misery. It's a humane thing to do. It's not a fun job. It takes a special breed of person to want to be a rancher, to want to basically have everything on their back as far as how the ranch is going to run, and to deal with the, less than pleasant aspects of it.
Right. Anything else that we should have asked that I maybe didn't ask?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
That you'd like to let, from your perspective, that you'd like to let everybody else know?
Well, I hope what the film will do is when people watch it, I think they're going to leave the theater or their viewing environment and probably feel pretty good about what they saw. There's a lot of positive aspects to the Sandhills. A lot of people don't know about them. If you're not from around here, you really have very little idea what we're talking about. You get to see how people deal with all the issues that crop up, both from a business standpoint, from a personal standpoint. They take it head on, which is kind of the way you should take it, I think. And you're going to find out, I think, from the film that you like these people. They're good people. They're doing good work. And, I believe that'll be one of the more positive aspects of the film. And you're going to find out that, a lot of the negativity you hear about raising cattle, which is kind of, it's more towards, when cattle get into the stockyards, that's kind of what TV tends to jump on and sensationalize a little bit. But you're going to find out that, these people take really good care of their cows. And you can tell, they're like any other animal. You can tell when they're happy.
You can tell when he comes up to that, what was it, the window, and he came in and he's just wanting to eat his banana.
Oh yeah.
There's certain scenes in the film where you can just tell that bond with a few of those cows.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good word for it. There is a bond. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with them every day. And, everyone has their pets, the cows that they can kind of hand feed. And, but then again, you don't want to forget, these are, 1,200 pound animals that can really do some harm to you. So, there's a certain amount of, trust involved. Yeah. But also watching out, because it's that one time when you're not paying attention when the cow's going to back over you or, cause you some damage, and that does happen out there too.
Right. Awesome. I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you.
That was great. Again, thanks for sending me the film. We were all so excited.